All right, we are recording. So we're going to be recording this so that you can refer back to it. And for those who aren't able to attend today, can catch up on what we discussed. All right, so before we talk about the content of setting meaningful goals, I want to talk about the context that we're in. So I want to acknowledge that right now, timing is less than perfect. We are in the midst of strategic planning, but we don't have a strategic plan with clear strategies and objectives yet. So we won't be able to have goals that clearly cascade from our strategic plan. It's still going to be in the drafting phase. But there will be opportunities to practice that flexibility this summer once we do have that strategic plan in place, and that will be a time to kind of review and make sure there's alignment. In the meantime, as you're thinking about goals, you could consider employee engagement opportunities. So the survey we took place in 2019, and we still do have those reports that you can look at and maybe use to help guide some goals for your departments or your teams, for yourself. And you can also seek input from your supervisor on potential areas based on the work we already know is in the works and the work that needs to be done. As you're thinking about setting goals, include project-based goals, which cover your work span. So again, thinking about what work is already going on, or at this point, which work is not dependent on the strategic plan to start. These could be process improvement projects or cross-training projects, and we'll be talking about those types of projects a little bit later on. And then also focus more broadly than professional development. And this is actually going to be a bit of a change for us because in the past, HR has recommended a few work-related goals in addition to a professional development goal. But in this new approach, we are recommending professional development maybe as part of a larger goal where the learning is applied rather than professional development being the end goal. And again, we'll be sharing some examples a little bit later on as well. So with that context setting, I will turn it over to Christina to get us going.
Thank you, Ashley. Great to be here today. Good afternoon, everyone. Great for everybody to join us today to talk about goals and to learn more about what we mean by goals with this new simplified strategic performance management approach. We're going to start with a quick recap of kind of the transition of where we came from, how we got here, and then we'll move into the strategies and priorities for the goal setting itself with some opportunity to practice as well. So with performance management, it's critical for the success of any team, of any organization. It's to make sure that the right work gets done, and it does so in support of the strategic goals. Performance management is one of LTD's strategic priorities along with development and engagement. As we do the engagement survey that Ashley just mentioned a moment ago back in 2019, and it'll be kicking off again this fall as well. So lots of connections between all of that work. When LTD started looking at performance management, though, specifically, we found that here at the university, there was a lot of variety in performance management across the units. And there were opportunities to do things more efficiently and more effectively because the current practices were leading to some inefficiencies, some administratively overly burdensome processes that felt that they could be done better. Most units we found had a traditional approach to performance management, and it's that kind of top graph, if you will, on the slide that you see there, where there is a lot of activities around goals at the beginning of the year, making sure that things are crafted or worded perfectly before they get typically, and then the traditional approach set aside and then maybe shelved or forgotten about because the real work at that point needs to get done. And then at the end of the year, there's a flurry of activity trying to remember, what did we set for our goals, where are they at, how, updating things, getting feedback. So the bottom graph is what we are moving to a more effective approach to performance management. And it shifts the focus away from just that kind of year-end form to having the dialogue throughout the year, and that dialogue is based on the goals that are set at the beginning of the year. So it's really being clear about what needs to be done at the beginning, discussing it, flexing, updating throughout the year. And then at the end of the year, it's really just a recap of or a review of what happened during that year. This is just a visual recap then of the simplified performance management and the 3 aspects, which are setting effective goals at the beginning of the performance cycle, having ongoing check-ins or that regular dialogue throughout the performance cycle, and then at the end of the cycle, having that review. So the process starts with goals. So today that's going to be our focus today, looking at, what do we mean by effective goals and some strategies and tips. So as supervisors, you may already be doing that, which is great. It might be an opportunity to just kind of remind yourself, reflect on what you're doing, revise or refine some of the strategies that you already have in place. So when it comes to goals, the purpose of the goal is to get the right work done effectively. And we'll talk throughout today's workshop that there's a variety of different ways to approach the work. Science says that people with goals perform better than those without goals. So performance is better when there are clear expectations about what needs to get done, and then there are standards that are clear so people know if they're being reached and what they need to do to reach them. Bigger goals deliver better results. So goals motivate when they are moderately challenging, so having something to strive for. Science also says that who sets the goal doesn't matter, meaning that a lot of time shouldn't be spent on figuring out who is best to set it. Is the employee, is it the manager, somebody else, but those would be the 2 primary roles. The employee should have input, but the manager is positionally has that role to have that final authority and to make sure that it's connected to the bigger team or the bigger department, unit, organization as well. So do what works best. In the end, it's typically a joint conversation so that there is input with the manager kind of making sure that it fits in with the bigger contribution to the work. And that fewer goals deliver higher performance. So the more goals that one person has, the less time and attention that can be paid to each goal in particular. So keeping it focused on those few meaningful things. It's important to create the time to design well-created goals or effective goals because they are powerful in motivating, improving performance, lots of connections to engagement, and having the clear and relevant goals also provide the foundation for meaningful coaching and feedback throughout the year. So it's really setting that agenda about what to talk about throughout the year in order to promote and foster improved performance and success. So translating the science into strategy, so what to do or how to set effective goals. The first one there is to keep things simple, meaning that the goal should be specific, it should be important, and it should be measurable. So that is being clear about what it is, that the work or what the goal achieves is important to the team or to the department, and that it is measurable, which also can take a variety of different forms. But it is describing in a way that you and the employee have a shared understanding of what is going to change as a result of the goal or what should they be doing. So it could be a qualitative measurement, it could be a quantitative measurement. And again, it depends a lot on the role and the work as well. Goals should describe the results or the what and the how or the behavior. So what is it that the employee needs to achieve? And again, make sure it's specific, important. And then also the behavior. So what do they need to do or what competencies do they need to engage in order to be successful in achieving those results? They should be aligned. So goals should be aligned with the team and unit goals and strategies. So it is clear to the employee what their contribution is to kind of that bigger goal. So again, it's more meaningful when those connections exist, becomes important, becomes more impactful. And again, this may look like you're linking up to goals or they're cascading down. So again, there's a little bit of flexibility in the way to approach this. The bottom line is you don't need to wait for other things to maybe necessarily take place. As Ashley mentioned a moment ago, sometimes the timing isn't ideal, but work still needs to get done. However, they can also be flexible. So I'll jump to that last one there too. So as information, and maybe it's strategy in the case for the libraries, or maybe it's other information, becomes available throughout the year, that the goals should be built in a way that they become flexible. Sometimes too flexible may look like just pausing it for this performance cycle and coming back to it in the future, the next performance cycle. This past year with the pandemic and stuff, a lot of resources changed drastically. So you may have experienced that goals were paused because it just wasn't something that was realistic to get done during this performance cycle. And then the other one, the limited in number. So goals should also be focused or limited in number. So when it comes to goals and having big, meaningful goals that are motivating and challenging to employee, they should be limited in number. Within a given amount of time, performance appraisal cycle, there is only a limited amount of work that can be done. So making sure that the focus is put toward the things that really do have the most impact and are highest priority.
Christina, can I jump in really quick?
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to make a note about that flexibility and kind of speak to the role of the supervisor in setting goals and then doing ongoing check-ins, which we'll be talking about in a future training. But Nicole Cardoza recently, just last week, held a webinar with the Center for Spirituality and Healing talking about anti-racism and wellness. And she talked about goals because goals are such a kind of key piece of wellness, but it struck me because we often have a relationship where if we don't achieve a goal, there's fear of punishment or punitive measures. And really what we're looking for is switching from if you don't achieve a goal, you'll be punished to if you don't achieve a goal, we'll support you. So looking at those opportunities to provide that support, provide resources, provide that kind of space to say, we do need to pause this and maybe push it to the next performance cycle. We really want to emphasize that this is not meant to be a punitive exercise, but it is about the support.
Well, and Ashley, I just wanted to add to that. It seems like if a goal isn't being accomplished, there could be lots of extenuating factors, or there is a performance issue. And if there is a performance issue, again, that wouldn't be punitive. It would just be dealt with, and you would try to figure out what the problem is. And again, how could you support in a way that that's not an obstacle anymore? And if that doesn't work out, then you have a performance issue that you have to pursue a different way. But anyway.
Exactly, Julie. Yeah, thank you for voicing that.
That's all good things to keep in mind as we, talk about goals. And then the piece beyond this too is that ongoing dialogue too. So if something does go sideways or in an unexpected direction, the conversation really starts with figuring out, why did that happen, and trying to uncover and understand the employee's perspectives. And it may be things, beyond their control, but you're not going to know without that conversation as well. And then given that, it kind of comes back to these goal strategies of being flexible. Ultimately, the employee, we want the employee to succeed. So what is the best way to flex and support them in order to make sure that they can still be successful in achieving their goals at the end of the year? And again, making sure that the right work is being done to support the team as a whole. So all really, really great points. So goals versus tasks, they can easily be confused. So I wanted to take a moment just to kind of clarify or differentiate between goals and tasks. The job tasks, what we mean by that, they're typically those bullet points on a job description. They may be the daily routine work that keeps the team, unit, department operational. They're typically frequently done or repetitively done, kind of checklist style. So it may be like the weekly checklist, the monthly checklist. It is really important work to get done in order to keep things moving. But they are different from what we mean by goal. And effective goals, they require more time, more effort. They relate to work that might have a bigger impact than just doing something that can be done, first thing Monday morning and doesn't need to be done again until next week. And they have larger, more meaningful contributions to the overall priorities. Goals, as we're describing them in an effective way, they aren't usually something that can be completed in a day. Once done, they may not be done again for a while. So it might be an annual goal. It might be something you have to do on an annual basis or a biannual basis. Sometimes the confusion arises because sometimes their tasks need to be done in order to reach that goal. So there might be subtasks or milestones or little things done along the way that can build and support that bigger, more meaningful, effective goal. So the tasks, they can contribute to the overall goal, and they are really important to be done as well, but they shouldn't be the goal in itself. So that the goal shouldn't just be a kind of a copy and paste of a job description bullet list. So some examples when it comes to crafting goals, some various approaches to consider when getting started. One way to think about goals is through the lens of efficiencies. And when considering efficiencies, it's about thinking through what can be done to make meaningful efficiencies in that work or for that employee in order to improve performance in tasks that are typically done. So are there ways to make that better? Are there ways to make it faster, to save resources? Maybe it's time, maybe it's money as well. So here is an example of something that is scoped within this kind of idea or this approach of efficiencies. And this goal title here is to improve a process to reduce waste. Specifically, the goal reads to implement a new process to reduce the inventory by 10%, to move to an operational efficiencies, to move from accommodating multiple requests on an ad hoc basis to designing and implementing a workflow that would help meet most requests in a consistent manner. So you can see here there's some, it still follows the strategies that we previously discussed. So that idea of measurement, the 10%, what it is, the impact of it by implementing workflow to make things, the operations more efficient. So even within the scope of efficiencies, it's still following those strategies in order to be effective. And another way to explore ideas for goals is to consider kind of this idea of expansion. And these are projects or functions maybe outside of that daily routine that could support or contribute to a meaningful impact on your priorities. So thinking through, are there ways to add more variety to the work, more complexity to the work, or maybe it's almost just a special project as assigned because of something that a priority that comes up in that particular year. So in this particular example, let's say your employee has been on your team for a while, they typically manage a database. However, there's a conference coming up this year, biannual or annual conference or board meeting that is a project that needs to be accomplished, and this particular employee is interested in event planning. So the goal for them, this might be somewhat of a developmental goal or a stretch assignment in this applied way. It could be to coordinate resources for a professional conference. And it might read that successfully lead the coordination of the logistics for the upcoming conference by proactively sourcing and aligning resources defined by the chair of the committee. So again, it's clear what needs to be done. It's within the budget, specifically the logistics, how to do it, proactively source, proactively align, interact with the chair committee in order to accomplish that. So this next example here, I'll turn it over to Ashley to walk through a library specific example.
Thanks, Christina. Yeah, so putting this into practice and thinking about the model that we've used for a couple of years now on setting meaningful goals, how this might apply when we're looking at, say, a goal of efficiency. So we have an example, Rita is a library assistant 2. Daily work involves processing course reserves and digital course packet requests. So there might be an opportunity, a description of the goal would be to update process and workflow documentation. So where the process is outlined, and identify opportunities to eliminate waste. That measure of success, how they'll know that they're successful, is having a completed updated workflow documentation and present a recommendations list to the team within 6 months. Then thinking through how the goal will be accomplished, potentially watching some LinkedIn Learning training or other free training on process improvement and documentation so that they build that foundational knowledge and understanding of how to approach process improvement if they're new to it, review the workflow and update it with the new steps, get input from the team on bottlenecks, etc. So you see how by laying it out, I mean, these are all kind of the tasks sort of within the larger goal, but you can also see how the behaviors show up. So there's learning and then applying the new information. There's listening, getting input from the team, thinking strategically, problem solving, all kind of wrapped into the goal. And then the alignment with strategy, kind of how this fits in. It could connect with the department goal to provide streamlined service. So you see, kind of using this model, you can sort of lay it out to make sure that you've got all of the pieces of that well-designed goal laid out. And you can also see where there might be opportunities for that flexibility to come in. So at this current point, the measures of success say within 6 months. But let's say other things come up and you have a check-in and review, and yeah, it's just not going to get done within that 6-month time frame, but maybe we push it out to 9. So there, by explaining what that measure of success is, you also kind of give room to have some negotiation and flexibility within it. And then another good example is around development. So, I talked a little bit thinking more broadly than just professional development as the goal, but there might be some goals related to one's development. So again, we're looking at Rita, Library Assistant 2. And this one involves going through the what's it called? Office of Equity and Diversity. There we go, certificate, all these acronyms. But to get an understanding, this could be kind of within that diversity, equity, and inclusion goal. So the description would be to finish the OED certificate and lead conversations with the team to identify steps to support DEI efforts. Again, this shows it's not just about learning the information, but how is it going to be applied and maybe shared out. Measure of success, attend 6 courses and lead 3 team meetings on what you learned, how the goal will be accomplished. Actively sign up for 6 OED courses, schedule 3 team meetings, prepare agendas, talking points, discussion questions. And again, those are kind of the tasks associated with it or the steps associated with it, but you can see the behaviors of being proactive, signing up, leading discussion, facilitation. So those are some of the other behaviors that would be associated with this goal. And alignment to strategy, this goal connects to our inclusion, diversity, equity, and accessibility statement.
So hopefully those goals, you can relate to those, and we'll give you a moment here to practice and discuss with other colleagues to bring some of your ideas and get feedback on your ideas for some goals or some thoughts that you might be moving toward when it comes to goals for the next performance appraisal cycle. So the goals, there's a lot of meaningful work to get done within any, job, role, team, within any performance appraisal period. So we just briefly talk through these approaches too when it comes to looking at goals. Maybe it's a project, maybe it's a development, maybe the approach is efficiencies, maybe it is expansion. When it comes to landing on what that final goal, will be at the start of the year, and again, might need to flex throughout the year, but when landing on that, consider a couple of things, where your team is at. So what are the priorities that your team needs to accomplish for the coming year? So what is really big and meaningful now is in over the next year, what projects do need to be done? Employees is development a priority to be ready for, longer term projects, or there are things that do need to be more efficient? And then also where this is the employee at, so their perspective as well. Not everyone is in the same place. You may have employees that just join your team. You may have employees that have, been on your team for a while. They have different development, different goals, different experience needs, even career interests, time on the job. So there's a lot of different employee qualities that come into it too. So keeping in mind kind of what the work that your team needs to get done, and then where the employee is at, and to kind of pull those pieces into it as you craft and think about the goals. And having conversations with employees too to understand those points if you're not sure where they're at in their career life cycle or in their interests as well. And then regardless of whatever the approach is that you take, efficiencies, expansion, development, whatever that might be, it's always important to follow those strategies that we walked through a moment ago on how to set effective goals, keeping them simple, aligned, the what, the how, flexible, and focused as well. And those will help get your work beyond just kind of going through or getting those task lists done and getting that meaningful work that your team needs to accomplish accomplished. And then the goals cross-check. This is after the goal is created. This is really just a really quick glance or audit, if you will, just to kind of review what you set or review the goals that you have and making sure that they fit those strategies. So it's really about answering yes to these particular questions, to make sure that they are aligned with those effective strategies. And if you're unsure or if they're a yes or not, or if they're a no, then it's circling back to revise in those areas to make them more effective. So we're going to give you an opportunity to practice now. So we have an activity that we are going to send you off into breakout rooms to discuss in smaller groups. And what we would like you to do is practice writing or revising, or just any topics or questions that you may have about goals or ideas that you may have at this point. Some time to share with your colleagues or to get feedback with them if you have some specific things. So given your role in your department, think about what results do you want to achieve, to start thinking about maybe kind of the topics or the goal areas that you need to build goals around. What are the short, midterm, long-term versions of that might be helpful to consider. There's the goal checklist to just kind of run things by, or maybe a helpful place to provide feedback around as well. So we're going to send you out into your breakout rooms for about 10 to 15 minutes to talk, and then we'll pull you back into the large group to hear some of the examples that you spoke about, and also answer any questions that you may have about this. And at the last thing, at the bottom of the slide, it says an example goal, explore potential development opportunities. So if you do need an idea or something to discuss around, that might be something to start with. So if you did have to set development opportunities for your employee, what might, maybe think about a specific employee or employees, if that's more helpful to you, and think about what the goal would look like if that was the scope or the topic area for the particular goal. And it looks like Ashley threw the worksheet in the chat, so that if that is helpful to use that worksheet to work through the goals with those different specific areas that the examples were based on earlier, please feel free to use that workshop. So again, as you kind of move to breakout rooms, kind of, individually kind of think about what would be helpful to get feedback around or share with the group. When you arrive there, share, discuss, get the feedback, and then we'll pull you back to hear what the small groups have to say. So any questions at this point before we kind of send you off into your virtual rooms? Okay, so I think with that, I think Ashley's working on the breakout room. So I guess as soon as you get that option to join, please select that option and it'll take you to your small group. Well, welcome back, everyone. Hopefully everybody had some good conversations in the small group that they participated in. Just in general, was there any small group that would like to share some takeaways from the or specific examples that were discussed in the small groups? Feel free to unmute and share, or throw it in the chat, whatever works best for you. So any specific examples or any specific kind of key takeaways that were really helpful to discuss with the small group, or maybe feedback that you got about a particular goal that you were working through? Okay, a question about setting goals for transactional business unit. Could you say more, or I don't know if that makes sense to Ashley maybe in the chat? Is it just the, I guess my question would be, is it for transactional work that is being done? Yeah, task-oriented units.
This is for Sean's unit. I don't know if Sean made it back.
Okay.
Finance and facilities. Oh, there he is.
Yeah, I did. I can talk about the challenge for me, at least in more of a business office sense. So this is some jobs are very transactional oriented that have defined procedures that people have to follow that are not in our control, and they're more university wide. And the challenge of setting up a goal that when someone's entire job is focused on that job description, how to set up a goal that in a sense moves beyond that job description when there's no time or freedom to change a procedure that's a university-wide procedure.
Mm-hmm. And is that, so I would say I might start with maybe in that particular case, depending on where the employee is at, is maybe to consider if the process is very well defined, it might be kind of taking that expansion maybe approach, and looking at, are there other areas that that employee wants to develop in that are outside of that kind of process driven approach that their job, needs them to do. And if so, are there ways to scope out some time and have some time away from that normal day-to-day kind of routine operational aspect of the role that they can develop in other things. And that could, depending on their development interest, that could take a variety of different forms. It might also be too, is the process, are there areas for efficiencies, or are there areas to expand it, make it more accessible, make it, increase diversity and inclusion around things like that. So maybe looking at the process in a bit of a different way, or interacting with the business owners of the process to see if there's ways to make it more efficient. Or maybe it could even be something about, setting it up if an employee had to come in, like a new employee, kind of how to learn the process, or kind of revising or revamping those standard operating procedures as well. Was there anything else Ashley to add, or anything else from the group that came out of that would be helpful to share with everybody?
Our group had a thought about some of the more transactional or task-oriented units. We were talking about that, but we were also talking about the dependencies that happen in the work, that a lot of times efficiencies or development can't really happen just with one person. And so we wondered about having the group take on a goal, and then maybe different people would have different aspects of it, but it really would be for a group of people, or something that they're all kind of taking part in, and it possibly could be even the same goal for everyone, something like the professional development, if it's the OED goal, that everybody in the department decides collectively to do that together. But we did think that there might be some room there to make it more of a group. Not that each person wouldn't have their own responsibility to it, but that might make it a little easier to think through.
Yeah, that seems like a really effective way to approach a goal. I would make sure, though, if it is something that is more group oriented like that, to make sure that each employee is clear about what their particular contribution is. So you kind of alluded to that. So just thinking through, like you as a supervisor, setting up ways in which, if you had to give them individual kind of coaching and feedback, what would that look like? So define it in a way that allows you to do that. Absolutely. Just for the sake of time, I know we are coming up on our time here, and we have about 10 minutes or so just to share some additional information that we have. But this is, I think, the approaching those task-oriented jobs to create goals out of those are typically where a lot of questions come up, and it definitely can be a challenge. So again, get creative, get feedback from others, get input from employees to make sure that the goals do pertain to larger, more meaningful work as well. This is the example based on that idea that we provided. So you may have had a chance to talk about this. If not, just to kind of walk through this quickly about exploring potential development opportunities. So in this case, if this was an area of scope, maybe it could be around the digital information services to serve the library users better. There's a measure of success here, obtaining information from interviews, research from colleagues, information about the next phase of the goal to assist a liaison. So maybe it's just a project to collect information to kind of describe what is happening, how the goal will be accomplished, asking the supervisor for names of colleagues, recording the digital information available. And there are some timelines by January of 2022 that are built into it. And then it would be aligned with strategy, and that aligns with the U Library's goals to be leaders and trusted experts in the profession. So it promotes that, and it gives an employee a piece of contributing to that overall strategy as well. So that's an example, just to kind of think through if that is helpful for you. Before we go on to the last few slides, were there any other insights or any other kind of, one challenge that we heard already was kind of, being thoughtful about the task-oriented jobs, but anything else that you might anticipate coming up when it comes to thinking through goals, setting goals for your team, questions employees may have about goals. I'll pause here for a moment. If anybody has any just questions in general about this information or anything you might anticipate.
So one thing that came up in our group and I think applies to parts of the libraries is a lot of our work is interwoven with others in other departments. And I wondered if you could just maybe speak a little bit about how you incorporate that into these, because it's not so much the individual, but you're having to rely on others to maybe help with your goals that might be out of your sphere of influence.
Yeah. Yes, and I think this is where that strategy of support and flexibility comes in. So it could be clearly defining who do you need to reach out, who does that employee need to reach out to? So where are the intersections and who should they be, like who are the key stakeholders? So who should they specifically be asking about, getting input from, getting ideas from, having, maybe there's some evaluation feedback as well. And then also keeping in mind too, that maybe that person is not available. Maybe that person, your employees train really hard, but that person is not being cooperative on the other side. So how might you flex the goal if that's the case? And maybe thinking through, being able to build that in as well. So I think a lot of the work here at the U, I mean, it's very interdependent, at some level, especially the libraries. I'm sure it's extremely interdependent as far as within and then across the colleges as well, and working with all of the students and other leaders and faculty and staff across the university as well. So again, it's just kind of thinking through like, what is the scope that your employee should be contributing within that interrelated web of work that needs to get done. And again, thinking through like, if you had to give the employee specific feedback, what would make sense to them within the scope of their role, within the scope of their influence as well. Slides after the session. Yes, we will be sending the slides after the session for the person to ask that in chat. Great question. So a couple of other slides, setting goals with employees. I won't spend a lot of time here just because you will have the slides after the session, but really it's about, thinking through what your team needs, making sure employees are clear about it and working with them to do exactly what we worked through today, creating these simple goals, making sure that they understand what effective goals are. There is a quick guide for this. Ashley sent it out in the pre-work. So there's that for reference as well as you work through this that has more detail. So a couple of connections. So libraries will be using the performance appraisal tool or the PAT. So I just wanted to spend a couple of moments connecting to what you can expect when you do get access to that system. I believe the access will open at the end of April for library employees. When an employee logs in, this is the landing page that they land on. We'll have their information on the bottom there. Number 1 there, it says goals maintained throughout the year. So this would be where an employee would go to add their goals. And again, it's open all year. So you can go in anytime throughout the year to add, update, change due dates, revise, whatever works. So again, it supports that flexibility. Supervisor.
I'm going to jump in really quick
please,
and address
please
the question. Yeah. So at the moment, we know that this is definitely rolling out for labor represented civil service and non-librarian P&A employees. But librarians, those in the librarian series will have a choice as a collective group to either opt in or opt out. And they're working on, the librarian committee is kind of leading that effort to identify the recommendations. So more to come for that group. But know that definitely for our labor represented civil service and non-librarian P&A employees, this is what's going to be opening up later in April.
Yeah, great question. Supervisor view. So supervisors log in as supervisors. This is the view that they would see. So again, very similar. Number 1, goals maintained throughout the year. When a supervisor or when an employee clicks on number 1, that goal option, it brings you to this page. So this is the actual goal page. So as you can see there, there's a space for a title, the description, and the completion date. So if you have a completion date, great. If not, you can leave it blank as well. This information, again, is available throughout the year. It is a shared view between the employee and the supervisor, so you can both, stay current on what is happening. If you type over the goal, it doesn't save if you actually go in and type over things. However, at the end of the performance cycle, whatever is in goals, it does archive it. But if you go in and you delete your goal title and you put in a new goal title, it's not going to save what was previously there. Moving on to next steps, I will turn it over to Ashley to talk about some upcoming and next steps.
Okay, so next steps, just a reminder of the resources, supervising.umn.edu. They just have a lot of really great stuff over there. So if you're ever encountering a supervising challenge, I highly recommend checking there because chances are they've got a guide that will help you answer your question. Know that we're going to be launching a benchmarking survey to help us kind of see the impact of this new performance management system. So that will be launching May 17th. There are 2 questions essentially. Am I meeting with my supervisor regularly, and are those meetings meaningful? So that will launch, we'll get some information, and then we'll talk through that at the next workshop, which is scheduled at this point for June 8th at 3 p.m. And that's going to be focused all on conducting ongoing check-ins. So how do you kind of practice what we preach on flexibility with those goals? In the meantime, if you have questions about the performance management process, about other additional resources, feel free to reach out to me. I'm going to be working on a kind of landing page on the staff web that houses all of the relevant information, including PAT training and tools, because I know that will be another element. It's the new process, new approach to performance management, and also a new workflow and tool. So there will be some more information, kind of timely information coming about how to access PAT, how to use it once we get to that point.
And then the last few slides in this deck here are just additional resources. So again, you'll get these, and it sounds like they will also be connected to your direct intranet. So these will be linked here, but wanted to call out that there are a lot of support and resources that are available to help you on the process side, on the system side, and then with the supervising.umn.edu, even things beyond performance management as well. So there's definitely, if you have a question, there's definitely resources support in order to connect you to the right resources. So with that, I see we are right at time. I don't know if anybody has any final questions or comments about this information. And also thank you for joining us today, your conversations in your small group and the other questions that you asked and examples you contributed. That's all really great. So again, feel free to throw it in the chat if you have any questions, or feel free to unmute and ask before leaving today.
And thank you again, Christina, for leading this and partnering with the libraries on implementing this new process. We really appreciate it.